Good evening, everyone. This is the Legislative Advocacy Community Engagement Meeting for August. I hope everyone is having a great summer. I won't say how many days are left until September because that will make us all sad. So we will jump right into our agenda. The first item on the agenda is a follow-up from our July meeting that we had with our legislators. Once again, I know we said it, but I did want to thank them for coming. It was definitely a very, constructive meeting. There was a lot of good information that came from it. I appreciate everyone who provided input on what we could discuss with them, as well as the community members who attended the meeting to support the district, and of course, to the staff and administrators who provided some paperwork and data in order for us to share with them. And so I just wanted to go over some of the things that we sort of suggested we should send to the legislators that they had asked for in the meeting. The first was they had asked for a detailed cost and required elements for the creation of full day kindergarten. I don't, we obviously don't know what they can do for us, but I feel that if we're able to present them with the breakdown of exactly what we need and how much it will cost, there's a better chance of them being able to get it than if they don't have that. Dr. Chinley, I know that you had mentioned there had been something done about the approximate cost last year. I don't know if that's changed at all, but if we could do possibly an updated.
So what happened was there was a cost analysis done, I want to say approximately 7 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
There was a conversation that we had with Mr. Take, myself, you, Ms. Allen was there. It was somewhere between 6 to 9 years ago. I don't know the exact date. And it talked about adding an addition, I'm doing it off the top of my head, in addition to Barclay Brook School, looking to the classrooms that we would need, Mill Lake, the annex where we currently have our ECE. Would no longer be used because it would be used for kindergarten. And then at Oak Tree, the conversation was, that would be for Mill Lake, Barclay Brook would need classrooms added on.
Yeah.
And then I remember that.
Potentially at Oak Tree, so.
And potentially at Oak Tree. So we had this conversation.
So I think where we stand right now is we could probably update a very loose projection, which is what we generated
About a month
last year.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Which was shared, I believe, and in some of the advocacy pieces in testimony. And that is based on a recent first grade enrollment, right? Because we are on year 5 of our demographic study. So that will be updated this year. So without any updated projections, we're just looking at first grade enrollment. What does that loosely translate into classrooms in each building? Again, not factoring in any, moving of children and, redistricting or any of that kind of stuff. And then I believe what Mr. Take did is he, took a very loose per square foot cost on the average square foot side of how many, we're talking extremely loose numbers. I think there's a lot to be discussed about what that would look like, if we need updated projections, like has the construction happen in town? Are we looking at more students moving in and things? What would a full day K program look like for us? Would we
Academically.
revisit the idea of centralizing it somewhere? And that would free up spaces in other buildings, other primaries? Would we do what we're talking about now in terms of distributing it at the primary level? We do have classes in most buildings that are in non-instructional spaces that have been retrofitted, right? So you have a classroom at Oak Tree in the media center, you have a classroom in the back of the stage. Again, they're in our LRFP, they're
Appropriate.
constructed and, everything's appropriate, but those are not where those classes should operate if we're going to address the growth and, everything. So would we take that into account when we talk about a project that would also facilitate kindergarten? So there's a lot of things to go through. I think at this point, we could give loose numbers so the legislators would have an idea that we're not talking hundreds of thousands, we're talking probably construction projects that would lead us into the millions. Exactly how many square feet and exactly what amount of rooms, if we were to do it next year, that's not something we're in a position to give without more information. But we can certainly say, we're not looking at a few $100,000.
That's millions.
Looking at
Minimum.
construction project minimally as we stand today, with the information that we have.
Teachers, benefits.
Well, the teachers is, and teachers is a reoccurring cost.
Right.
It's millions and millions of dollars, and we were
Right.
trying not
I
to.
think people don't
No,
understand
they don't.
that. Somebody was on Facebook the other day, they had a sign with nothing on it, and it said, "This is what the educators know about education," and it was blank. Oh, not educators, politicians, politicians. Yeah, sorry about that. And it was blank. And it's true. They don't know anything about education and how it should be run unless, like they said that night, we need to give them the specifications on what we need. And I would say down to the very last penny, so that they would know, well, hey, if we give them this much, they can do that, and they can maybe raise it with the question on in there.
And that's what I'm getting at.
We can't do the detailed numbers, they say, till we do a demographics.
Numbers and stuff.
Yeah, no.
I can tell you how much textbooks cost and stuff like that, but I
Right.
think if the goal is to give them food for thought to understand that
Right.
this is a big project.
Adam, we could say minimum of,
Right.
is where
And I
we,
think we could certainly go down that road. I think we probably need the demographers report, a big committee or a big group to determine what does this look like for us as a community?
Mhm.
That then drives what kind of projects we have in our buildings, and then we go in and we would have a design study done, and then we have down to the cost of the nails
Right.
and the screws in the doors to make the building. But that is a significant amount of time away from that. So I think until we get down that road, which is gonna be a part of our strategic plan,
Mhm.
right now, if we want to provide the legislators a refresher that we're talking millions potentially.
Yeah.
And if the demographic cut study comes back and says, you guys are built out, you just have your normal population attrition, that's gonna drastically change what our construction project will look like, which then,
Right.
hacks off the millions to less millions, right?
Yeah.
If they said all that construction, because this demographic study was done right before COVID. So the impacts of COVID are not included in these projections. So whether that delayed the build out, whether that impacted the build out and people left as people built, we don't have that projected yet. So this will be a refresh and an update post-COVID that will show us if we're built out, that's a lot different than if
Mhm.
everything they thought that was coming didn't come yet. We still have,
And I think,
hundreds of houses and stuff to come, so.
right, like I did just a very rough calculation looking at our enrollment from our board agendas, just from 2020 to, June of 2020 to June of 2024 at the 3 elementary schools. And overall, because there are some schools that have gone up a bit in enrollment and there's other schools that have gone down. But that specific level is, down over 100 students. It's about 110. So I think if, the numbers that we maybe had a few years ago are hopefully going to be less in terms of how much construction we would need to facilitate the number of kindergarten students we might have. But I think ultimately what we could, hopefully do now at least would be to give them what we know. And then say, once we have our updated demographers report, if there are drastic changes, then we could say there's been a change in what we expect. So here's what we need at that time, but at least we're giving them something now, because I would like to get this to them, at least from wherever we have right now, as soon as we can to work from.
And I support communicating the scope of the project. I think it would be in the same range that we've probably been communicating. We certainly, what we could do to update it is just look at this year's, or whether it was probably the end of last year's first grade enrollment. And that's the best we can do, because the majority of students, if they're in a private kindergarten, are starting in first grade, right? So we're not going to do our projections off of current kindergarten numbers. We want to do it off of first year full time. So we, and then we just take a look and say how many classrooms and generally spread it out. I think what we see in terms of our enrollment is historically, it's been on the Oak Tree Applegate side of town. We've seen a stabilization we see the bubbles coming through, right? You have dips in years and then they kind of go back up. But we do see an increase in population in the Bartlett Brook side of town, and that we know that's coming from the development down. I think it's on Mounts Mills. So where we used to see the development, we don't see it, and now we're pinched for space. We saw the stopgap project we're doing at Brookside right now. taking part of that media center and creating several small group instruction rooms. So again, as we look at projects, it's undoing the overcrowded that we already have, right? Because we're used to living that way, but it doesn't mean that's the way we should be living.
Right.
And it doesn't mean the state's okay with that in the long term
Mhm.
either. These are all temporary measures that we have in our
That's why the whole
long-range
stopgap.
facilities plan. So we undo those, then we get in a position to say, what else do we need to fit potentially increasing or decreasing kindergarten first grade numbers? So that's why we say we look at this and our best guess, but we're a ways away from the nuts and bolts and steel beams and girders and
Right,
exact,
right.
Bathrooms, like you have to have certain bathrooms.
But I also think that it's important, and this just, I just saw this, when I was looking at recent bills that came out, which this is nothing that's gone to the floor or anything, but in June on June 25th, there was a bill introduced, in the assembly that would require full-day kindergarten in all school districts and establishes the age requirement. And so I think it's also important for us to communicate to our legislators, if a bill like this were to pass, we are not equipped for that. So, you know, it's one of those unfunded mandates that we've spoken about before. This would be a very large one for us. Right now it's just in the committee level, and we know that there's a lot of bills that, don't ever come to fruition. But, I think that it's important for them to be aware, like, we need help with this, and especially if, a bill like that's gonna pass, we need help now. And see what comes from that.
And they need to see that it's millions because, we were very fortunate to have the, our legislatures here, but she respectfully, one of them did say, well, we gave you $300,000. Can you, like,
Right, use that towards.
and you use that toward, and we're talking more than $10 million could be.
yeah, I mean, I think a use for that would probably be to cover demographic studies, design studies,
Correct.
things like that, but that doesn't.
In any way touch what we would need for.
No, which is, and we're super thankful, I think, for anything.
Absolutely. We'll never say no. We'll take all the money they give us,
I
but
think that the other conversation, and this goes to the advocacy for funding across the board, is, if we're looking at, say, 10 additional classes across the district for kindergarten, you're looking at 10 additional teacher salaries and benefits as a reoccurring increasing cost, right?
Yeah.
The other costs of setting up a classroom and stuff are just your initial 1 year, setup pieces. So, that goes to the deeper funding piece of us getting, more funding so we can do what we need to do.
Mr. Kane, I mean, that's
So
something.
Dr. Lehman answered my first question, but that new bill that you spoke about, did they put a deadline on it where they would like everybody to have kindergarten?
Say that again, Gail?
If there was a deadline.
Deadline
when-
where they,
No, I think the idea would be, once that bill passed, you would need to take the steps.
They-
to move it.
right.
It looks like they used a previously written bill, because the dates that are in here, like, the district would be required to begin offering such a program by the beginning of 2021.
Yeah,
Like,
we
it
are
was
not-
a bill,
okay.
And
So they
kind of
just
pushed it along.
the number and are moving it
Yeah,
along.
the only thing that would still be directly relevant is they would make a uniform age of 5 by October 1st.
all right now, all the districts have
Yeah,
their own.
everybody has their own,
Which is
so
really confusing.
Yeah, like
October
yeah.
1st, you said?
Some have September 1st, some have October 1st, some have November 1st.
Yeah.
New York City has December 30th.
Yes.
So if you have a
31st.
student that's born October 15th and they change districts, it can get confusing
Yes,
sometimes.
no, I agree with that. It
Yeah,
should be
so
rotated.
this would make it uniform.
Yeah,
But
just-
we- Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, just one more kind of point of clarification. We do have the wraparound program, the extended
Right.
enrichment program.
Mhm.
So we do, to a certain extent, offer a full day program.
But then
It's
people
just
pay
not
for it.
Right.
the
Actually,
no charge piece, right? So we do have that full day piece. We've put in place for this year, the students at Oak Tree are
Yes.
remain at Oak Tree.
right,
Which we're very excited about.
yeah,
The challenge we have with that is we have,
I heard.
only so much space.
We have
There's a
a
wait
full
list for it.
Yeah.
I believe we were updated today. I think there's 12 families on a wait list, and we're maxed out with 50 or 52. So, that's
So you wanna-
excellent. We're not transporting those students across town.
That's the right way to go.
That's what I was
There-
gonna ask too about the
So
transport.
Yeah, we
Barclay
used to
Brook
do
and
that.
Brookside, or Barclay Brook and Mill Lake, those students can attend, and they do it at the Mill Lake Annex, and there are, from the last we heard, spaces available for any families that are interested. So, we do offer that in terms of full day
Can you
program.
speak about the kindergarten program if it was extended, how people have to understand it's not just the academics, that there's other, what happens with full day K? What they get offered, what some time that's taken up?
Well, I mean, it's almost like ESY. So we talk about,
It's
when
not
you
just
extend it, so you're adding,
lunch.
you're adding the lunch and the recess.
And it was says,
right?
so it's
And then-
not all academic that's extended.
Which those 2 periods in themselves are probably close to 90 minutes.
And right now, with students in kindergarten, except for phys ed, I believe, they don't get specials.
So they go to media.
Okay,
Yep. And
Right.
so that's what they all get. And
there's no music or art.
nope. So they spend, so their primary amount of time is math, language arts, a lot of interaction, socialization, and again, I support full day.
So do I.
in
So do I.
every way, shape and form.
Tasting.
But I just want to put that out there. and-
Right, there's a lot of logistics, it's not just adding.
Yeah, no, it's good, and I think it would be fine, but,
We want to make it
definitely-
happen, but eventually, so when is the key?
Yeah, and I think it's a priority. It's a part of our, it will be a part of our strategic
I
plan.
think it's a big priority.
Ms.
Go
Sharma,
ahead.
I'm new to this field, so on an average, any school, if they have kindergarten, how many classes normally they have?
it depends on the enrollment, like even in our own district,
Five kindergarten in a school or 6
yeah.
on an average. I'm
In a
just
school
asking for my
district, we're
knowledge.
saying.
I mean, do you know, how many kindergarten classes, I guess, do we have in our schools?
Well, we have AM and PM, so you'd have to add them together.
For how many classrooms, I
So
don't.
we have, I would say, and again, it's enrollment based. We have anywhere from, I would say, 3 classrooms in each building, and sometimes in one of the buildings, we may have a 4th classroom.
Also, we may.
So we may run 5 sections, but that still takes 3 classrooms because you got 2 AMs, 2
2
PMs.
PMs.
And then that other classroom is either an AM or a PM, and then we'll use it for a small group instruction area or something on
It's
the,
a big
on the opposite
project,
side.
yeah.
Oh, it's a major project.
And
It's important, but
It is important. and-
Do you limit the amount of students in those lower grades, especially in kindergarten, so that the academics, the teacher, you can limit
class size.
So,
size?
so our goal is to, we don't have like a board policy on class
Right.
size anywhere across the board. Naturally, as you get into the older grades, they naturally get a little
Right.
higher, especially in high school when they start
Yeah, well, that,
electives
yeah.
and things like that. At the
K
elementary
through
level,
5, Do you limit the amount of children?
it's not even that window. I would say we look
Not
at pay a little differently, and then we have a 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5. But it really depends, because if you have 4 sections of a class, you got a 5th one, you may go from 25 to
right,
18.
Yeah.
Ironically,
So-
when my daughter was in,
Based on enrollment.
when my daughter was in kindergarten, there was a late surge in enrollment. And so they actually ended up adding an additional section, like after school had started, because there was such she's in 8th grade now, so this was years and years ago. But because the class sizes had gotten.
And this plays a major role when you talk about budgeting. So when we come up with our numbers, which are going to be all projections, because we're doing everything so early, it's all projections. If we were, let's say, to have to cut back, what does that mean? Well, if we don't have financial support and we need to go down sections, class size goes up. So instead of having, let's say, 23 or 24 in upper elementary, you could wind up with 28. We don't have that now. So I think that's the conversation. That's a good question, because everything is,
That's a concern for me.
well, and that's the conversation we're gonna have, once we start doing our projections and we look at where we need to prioritize, we'll be having the conversations of what that looks like, because we're very proud of our class size here. The other thing is, we have a para in our kindergarten classes.
Right.
It's not required.
It is.
So, if we get, and we're not saying we're there, we don't know, but when the projections come out, those are the conversations we're gonna have, and those are the recommendations. Dr. Lehman, myself, Ms. Allen, those are the conversations, of course, we bring recommendations to the board of what it looks like, and that's why we keep on having the conversation. I believe, President Fabiano, if I may say what you said, no decision has been made whether or not we're going out for a question. We're not saying we are, we're not saying we're not. Why? Because these are the things that we need to look at. You can't say we're not, and we can't say we are, right? We won't need to. So those are the projections, and it's funny, because everything, curriculum, classes, everything comes back to finances.
It does. Everything.
It does. So, Rand, you didn't say that, right? I did say that correctly. So there's no decision made. So.
So that's only one piece.
So
of
what I'll do,
project.
we'll have, because I see what you requested here.
Yeah.
So we'll have a meeting again like we did last time, myself, you, Mr. Chade, Ms. Allen, we'll have that conversation about loose, because there will be
Yeah, I
loose
mean,
numbers.
It is what it is.
It is what
right
it is, right?
now.
So if it's like 16 million or 15 million or 17 million, I don't know, because I don't remember, whatever it was, does that sound like the right numbers?
You said 15.
I think I recall around 15.
15.
And that is construction based.
Right.
And again, these are,
From a while back and.
Well,
Construction's gone up, not down. course.
Right, but our needs might have gotten
Yeah,
down. So hopefully it levels out, right?
So what we don't know, so what we'll do is we'll have that meeting, at the, beginning of September, which is appropriate. We'll discuss it also with leadership, and then we'll be able to give you more information and come back. Because even though it's loose what we want it to be realistic,
Yeah.
to the best of our, that's the problem with projections, every time you project, because we haven't done our demographic study.
Right. So just to, I guess the next thing on the legislative or meeting follow-up, is the explanation of the two different pieces of legislation, S-2548 and S-2837. So just to recap, these were about the elections, the special elections. So one of these, don't quote me, but I believe S-254, I should probably look it up,
I
but,
got here.
Alright.
F-48
is-
is moving to November. You can have a question in November
Right.
for the subsequent.
this is the one that we want. So this is, if you have, right now, if you have a additional spending question in November, it is only for the current
Which
year.
is-
So you would have to start the year without the programs that
Which
you
is
want.
possible.
And if it passes, you can add them back. S-2837 added additional dates on which you can have an additional
But it's
spending
still a cost.
question,
Yeah.
which any of those dates, there is a cost. And I think that's the piece that our legislators, not necessarily, understanding everything as goes on in a school district, were unaware of, because, what they were told from, people down in Trenton was that this provides more flexibility, there's more options for dates. But it's important for them to know that unless it's a November election, there's a cost to the Board of Education. So you have to almost spend money to ask if you can,
Just
you
to
know,
get
spend more
They
money.
don't know.
It does say
I
that in the
don't-
bill.
I mean, respectfully, they don't know
It says
that.
it in the bill, it says fiscal impact. It concludes that this bill could result in a marginal expenditure increase.
So they do know,
for
so
districts
this- I mean,
without boards of school.
You want to re-explain to the legislators what they're legislating.
Right, well, this is what they had said at the meeting, that they were told there was additional flexibility on these dates, which is why they had passed the S-2837. And so they figured, like, they said the two bills are essentially the same, but I think just to give them the information, I don't even mind writing something up to send to them, just the difference between the two.
As discussed,
Yeah,
so
So,
they're being given this
we need to
information.
get that, and we need to get this out.
Right.
So that
yeah,
nothing happens
right,
with this.
Yeah.
So we haven't at least said our piece
right.
first.
All right, so I can write that up, that's fine, and I'll send it over to the committee. And so, the next thing was the preschool grant restrictions that came up. And, we sort of made them aware at the meeting that right now, there are districts that get millions of dollars in preschool aid right now that we are not eligible for because we don't have full day kindergarten. So our request was, can you include kindergarten
Yeah,
in that grant?
I had, as I had said at the meeting, Miss Christie reached out
Right.
to say, we're glad there's millions of dollars out there, but we need millions of dollars for the kindergarten before we can, and the response is the grants are for preschool only.
Right. Which,
So we're being punished for not having kindergarten.
basically,
Yes.
so, I think that's it. To me, it seems like an easy fix, just add kindergarten onto that, but, sometimes the things that seem easy, maybe they aren't, I don't know, but I think it's important for us to have on paper exactly
Would
what
you,
the
would you
challenges
be creating
are.
one letter that you'd send with all this? I think it would be better that way. I'm afraid if you send more than one, they're not reading it.
I mean, I think we could create one correspondence, but I think like the breakdown, like, could be on one page. And the preschool grant restriction, like, I think if you have it all on one thing, things might get lost, if that makes sense.
Would you have one piece of correspondence saying listing, bullet or something, the things were?
We could
Yes.
say like, please
No
see
more than
the
one
follow-up.
I agree.
They're not gonna read
No more than
any
one
more
page.
than one page. They have enough to read.
Well, even if we did it as attachments, perhaps, like, please see follow-up from the
Mine
meeting.
has
Doesn't matter what you have, like, on the attachment, or they just going.
You did good. I would just bullet it like she's saying,
I
first
think,
pages,
yeah,
right?
and
A
bullet
loose
according to-
projection,
yeah.
a loose projection of kindergarten for Monroe Township schools would be
Yes.
$15 million plus.
Yeah, according to
Um,
priority of
right.
needs.
Finally, be advised, the explanation of difference between legislation S-2548 is this.
Right,
S-2548 allows us to put in
right.
November. It's no cost to our district because we already have a November election. The other one costs us money.
Right.
And then the last thing would be, we currently, can you change the preschool grant restrictions?
Right.
So that it includes kindergarten.
Right, and then the last thing was the impact fees, which would actually be a good segue into the next topic, but just, we don't even have to give them the entire resolution, just say currently impact fees only provide for developers to be forced to pay for water, sewer, things of that nature. You know, the Monroe Township Board of Education requests that you amend this to include educational rights,
Exactly.
you know, and
So it's 2 words, educational cost, included in that line. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I saw that impact fees for schools, it's like nothing.
No,
right. Yeah, and it's been that way for a while, but
yes.
you know, I mean, forever really, and so I think we,
Well, at least 10 or 12 years, because years ago, what I remember is if you wanted to build something, you had to put a school in, the school
really,
district
because
asked
this was
you.
1975, this was
Wow.
passed.
We were,
So-
when I was on the board before, we put in a development on 130, and they gave us property towards the back to build a school. But they gave us 10 years to use the property. If not, it went back to the township. And when the board went back to inspect the property, it was right next to a railroad track.
Mm.
It was very narrow. It was next to that pipeline, if you remember, that blew up in Edison years ago.
Right,
That pipeline was right behind it, and we would have had to go up 3 stories.
Mm.
So it wasn't feasible for the board to build something there that was appropriate for education.
but now were they building the school itself or just giving you the land?
They gave us the land to build a school on, and we turned it down.
Right, but were they going to give you the money to build the school?
No.
That's what they, right,
No, they just gave us the land.
That wasn't utilized?
yeah, so
Yeah,
I
they
think
gave
that's what the impact fees would do, it would not only give the land, but
Right.
provide the money to build the
No,
school
they
itself.
gave us the property. We didn't think it was feasible enough for a school.
Right,
And then after 10 years, it went back to the township, and I think they put a first aid squad back there.
right,
Oh,
okay, but they're doing well the first aid, so that's good.
It is, because that area of town, Route 130, didn't have anything like that.
Mhm. I used to live over there, for Renaissance.
Well, that's the thing I'm talking about. The guy that built Renaissance, the property in the back, tried to give us some
So I'm the
property.
troublemaker, so is she. We
I
both
know, I
live there.
heard that, you guys lived
Might
there.
have been neighbors. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that was the
Hmm.
builder,
All right, so yeah, I think we can just add that one line.
Definitely.
Like, this is what we would request.
in bold.
All right,
so we'll send you the amount that we think is an approximate and you
Mhm.
agree to let it.
right, yeah, the amount, and then maybe just like what is needed, because I think just saying 15 million, I think we could just say it includes outfitting of the classrooms to include
Yes.
required bathroom space. I think like that would probably be most of what they need, because the rest of the stuff is very small, right? Like the difference between the 2 pieces of legislation is 2 sentences, right?
Mhm.
And it'll still hopefully fit to 1 page, just so they have that.
Sure.
All right,
Yep.
sounds good. All right, so the next item is the impact fee resolution. We did get a correspondence from New Jersey School Boards that was their initial request for resolution. I don't have that in front of me what the date is. I think it's October that it's due by. However, we had this initial rough draft of this resolution. After speaking with Ms. Fabiano, I asked if we could send it over to our attorney to review and, you know, confirm that all of the information in there was accurate. Mr. Weiss, our board attorney, actually also did some research on his own and added some additional
This is
information.
the end result.
So this is what he sent us as his revised copies. So I wanted to just, you know, read it through. I could go part by part, just to confirm that what we see here looks good. And then if we all agree, we can bring it
Well,
to
this
the
was
meeting
sent
next
to
week.
us, So I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Was this,
Be fine.
okay, you said to,
I said not to read it.
Not to
was
read it,
sent to
okay.
us, And I think.
is there
I didn't-
anything
I didn't
on
see
here?
anything. Now, this is to be sent to them in October for their December
Yes,
assembly,
For
correct?
October 3rd, it has to be submitted.
So that means you want this on,
If we can have it at this month's
Has to be,
meeting,
yes.
that would be great. I mean, the majority, it would just be a board approval and then.
so we'll just go off the changes, the justification, the red remains, the underline goes away.
Right.
And things that are crossed off get disappeared.
Yeah,
Right.
and he actually, the way he sent it, which I can forward over, you can just click on the edits, so that we don't even have
I
to do
did
it yourself.
I didn't,
I can forward it to you, he had
and
responded.
Adam as well.
Yeah.
And Machine. Okay.
Sounds good.
I think it's great.
and
I'll be
then-
there in when is it?
And actually
December?
more.
December what?
Okay, December 7th is the
But here, you want it to for next month?
next,
Yeah,
yeah, next
okay.
week, because I won't be
We can
here in
approve it
September,
next
so if we can do it. that would be
Well,
Yeah, I'll send it
It's,
between
when is the
meetings.
next meeting, December seventh?
The next delegate assembly is December seventh. So there's a resolution subcommittee meetings, which are through New Jersey school boards where, I actually happen to be on it, so that'll be really fun because I'll be voting on my own resolution. But, so it's a group of school board members from various legislative districts. There's one per legislative district. I don't think it's all the districts for the resolutions. It comes from the legislative committee. I might be sounding like I'm speaking a foreign language right now, but, essentially we meet, at least once for this last delegate assembly, because there were so many, we had to meet 3 times, and review the resolutions, whether or not they should be recommended and move forward to the delegate assembly. And then December seventh is the delegate assembly where one board member from each school district attends, at Mercer County College. Ms. Sharma had attended as the, delegate in.
Yeah, but I think I'm the delegate, yeah.
Is going to be representing us in December. And if that passes, if the majority of school districts approve it, it gets put into the policy manual for New Jersey school boards, which basically they use to lobby at the legislative level.
Yeah.
So then it would not just be Monroe Township asking for impact fees, but New Jersey school boards representing all the school boards in the state.
Right.
So
So that makes a difference.
yeah,
Speaking of school boards, I don't know if anybody saw, but we are getting a new field service rep.
Oh,
That's
wow,
Marianne Friedman.
Oh, wow,
Marianne
really?
Friedman
I
is
did not see
back.
that. Okay.
I got an email earlier
I don't know her.
I don't know who it, like, who got it and who didn't.
Right.
But I just got an email, at 2:15 that came through that said, Marianne Friedman is going to be our
Did she change her?
field service rep again. No, this is the email. this is
Oh,
the
Mercer.
person that-
Okay.
Then Marianne Friedman, in the letter, it says that Marianne Friedman is going to,
They keep,
Does it
she's
say
going to be the field service
What
rep
happened
for
to Patty
Middlesex
Reeves?
County.
Did Patty Reese move up or a different district? We don't.
I have no idea. I just,
I thought she went, because originally Marion Freeman went to the Monmouth County, remember? She moved over and then.
right.
I didn't know her. I
Oh,
only know,
was that
I
one?
only know one lady.
Yeah.
They've been working on adding reps.
Yes, I know that.
I think I talked to Patty at our last strategic planning, and she said, the goal was for them to hire a bunch of field reps. And then I think she had 4 counties,
Mhm.
Right, yeah.
so there's no way,
It's too much. Yeah.
there's 30-something districts in our county alone, so.
Maybe they hired someone else.
So by hiring those other staff members, I think they relocated.
Yeah.
And repositioned the current one, so
Okay.
that would be nice.
Yeah, she had previous ones.
Right. Yeah, we only had Ms. Reese for about 1.5 years, I think.
Mhm.
All right, good to know. Okay, so I will send over the, impact fee resolution right after the meeting. While I'm sitting over there waiting for my next meeting. Next is the website update. Dr. Lehman, if you can
Sure.
share some information.
So, Mr. Feldman, myself, Mr. Moralda, and, our webmaster, NA, he's in the process of I guess the best way I could describe it is our data has been moved over just recently. That process was completed. It took several weeks, for the company to take the website data we have now and put it on our new template. But in doing so, it's almost like, I guess, when you convert, say, an Excel spreadsheet to something else. Now you go through and you see all the things that are out of place and the fonts are different or the fonts don't come over. So we are in the process of, NA and Mr. Feldman, did some training on the website, how to manipulate it, how to, develop it. It's much more complex than our other one. It does sync nicely with a bunch of calendars, multiple calendars, tiers of calendars that can populate. And we did pick a design and a layout. So they're going through and updating the fields, going through subpages. Our primary focus right now is the district webpage, the landing site, and then we can kind of replicate that as a base for each school. And then once we get into subpages and things like that. So I would say a target completion date, because that transfer of data was much longer than expected. I would say to avoid any transition during the first few weeks of school,
Right.
where everybody's looking for back to school lists and checking out their teachers' web pages and all that stuff. I think we're probably more in the October timeframe now for a new kind of fresh release on this. They're designing it, and both the web version as well as the mobile version. They are, this current website, you can bounce back and forth and see what your changes look like, both in real time in different devices, a tablet versus a phone, different size phones and stuff. So another thing we're doing, and what we'll, Mr. Geraldo will task some of the interns the student interns when they come back in is our photos from the old website are not nearly the resolution that we need for the photos and the media for this website. So we found a few kind of as starter placeholders, but we'll go through, and that's a great, project for our student interns to develop and create portfolios and things like that. So we have a lot of things in front of us, and then when it rolls out, it will be continuing a work in progress. So it's exciting. I think it's coming along.
Cool.
We have a lot of work to do. What we did is the primary focus for the webmaster right now is that's an additional responsibility to his regular job is getting the buildings ready, formatting all the printers and
So
Chromebooks.
we have
and things
a
like that.
webmaster right now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then do we have anyone at each of the, I feel like there was a position at some of the schools in regards to.
So
the web?
most of the most of the buildings have their secretaries that can log in and update calendars and even change photos and things like that. So that'll be another piece, once we have these frameworks for the pages installed, and we will have to teach them how to update and manipulate all that information so the schools can change theirs. And what's nice is everything's linked now. So as calendar events change in one area, it will filter up to the district, filter back down if we change. Because that's one of our biggest challenges is everybody's calendar. When one gets updated, we need to make sure they all get updated. So
Right.
it's neat. We'll have there's a news section that'll be on the website and current events and things like that. So
Okay, it's great. Does anyone have any questions about the website?
So I know that this is something the committee has talked about since I think we both started in the committee.
Yeah, we've been on this the whole time.
And the website was something that we had been talking about, for a while, and I think it's great to finally see this, coming to fruition, and we talked about, cleaning up the information that was on there and, giving it a fresh new look, so, it's exciting.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I agree. And I think it's definitely something that was needed. And so definitely look forward to seeing what it becomes and making it user friendly for everybody. Great. Next is collaboration for a 4003-S1986, which is the funding formula task force. So I like just putting these words down on the paper. It's fun for me, but essentially. So essentially, one thing that, Monroe has been saying for a very long time, that a lot of other districts are now seeing as well, is the need for the new funding formula. And while we, have seen several Band-Aids, especially for districts that have lost funds, it really, while I feel for those districts that have lost money, I think what a positive that has come from that, if you will, is that there are now a lot of districts that agree that a new funding formula is needed. And so, we know that there was legislation reintroduced, which is a different number, but essentially the same legislation that has been there before. But what I thought might be a good task for this committee would be to reach out to the districts that either are not getting what, should be their fair share, or that are part of S2 and have seen, the millions of dollars lost, to almost lobby together and put something with multiple districts that then go to a lot of legislators instead of just our own, to really push this piece of legislation forward. So, I think it's easy to find out what districts have lost funds or haven't gotten a lot just by looking at the state website.
Sorry, I have to sneeze and it's stuck, but Senator Gopal's districts
Yes.
were
Right.
severely impacted by funding because now he is a very big proponent of the task force, so those would be good districts, I feel like,
Right.
to reach out and collaborate with.
And that's what county, that's down in.
So he's in Monmouth
Monmouth
and over,
County,
yeah,
Monmouth
partial
County.
Monmouth, partial.
Yeah, he's
Ocean.
the only legislator that I saw that got really
He is
mad when all his districts.
Which is funny, because he's the one that was at the workshop when I asked that question.
Mhm.
That was him. So
Yeah.
I think it's really, you know,
he-
I don't say funny, but
He
ironic.
was on a school board's, training.
Right.
Or not a training, but like a meeting.
He was on one of our
Like a hybrid
meeting
and
events for New
It
Jersey
was
School
right
Board. Yeah,
after,
yeah.
I believe it was right after
yes.
districts were made aware of what their funding, what will be allocated to them for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was pretty heated. And I think Mr. Payne, you were on there because I
Yeah.
believe you spoke to him and you're like, yeah, Monroe's been having this issue for years. And we appreciate that now you're feeling
Mhm.
our
Pain.
pain. So, okay, like, no help,
Right.
do something about it.
Mhm.
So,
So, I mean, I'm gonna try to delegate tasks. I'm really bad at that usually, but is there anyone that would, I can even send the link, but the list of the funding for the districts to see, kind of a list of who's lost funding throughout the last year, as well as districts that haven't gotten a lot of funding to begin with, like Monroe. That would sort of be the first step, if someone would be willing to do that, put that list together. Any
So, I'm thinking of, well, the way my computer's been working, I don't know. But, I don't mind doing it because I am home, so I'm not babysitting, but, how would I break that down to finding? You give me a description, but
Right,
computer savvy,
yeah.
I could say I'm not, so.
I mean,
how would you-
probably, because you could probably just sort it by
That's-
the amount, but I could probably do that also, or I can show you how to do it when we're sitting sometime.
Would you?
Yeah.
And I don't mind doing it because I'm very curious myself. But didn't we just read in the paper, Freehold, and what was the other district that the state,
Tom's River.
Tom's River, the state told
Tom's River,
them
Jackson. I
that
think.
Jackson has to pay
they
back,
have to,
they're
pay-
charging them.
they have to pay their district to keep their schools going. And it was told by the state that they had to do it.
Yeah, so we should reach out to them.
Jackson and Freehold?
And Tom's River, I know. Tom's River, actually, they had introduced, a resolution to require full-day kindergarten because they have it right now. And because it's not part of a thorough and efficient, it's over adequacy, the state was saying, get rid of it. And so,
Like
I mean, I
I
should
said,
say that, they weren't saying get rid of it, they're saying here is an option that you don't need.
so,
State
yeah. so
Band-Aid,
basically there's
state
get
does
rid of
not
it.
Right,
Yeah.
now Freehold and Freehold Borough, I know there's two of them down there.
Well, there's Freehold Borough, there's Freehold Township, and then there's Freehold Regional High School District. So I can tell you, like, I know Freehold Regional High School District is the one that lost a lot of money over the last few years. It includes 6 different high schools, it's only high school. And so because of that, it affects a lot of townships, because it's Marlboro, Manalapan, Howell,
Howell, my granddaughter. was
Freehold
there.
Borough, Freehold Township, and Colts Neck.
Wow,
And then as well as like English Town and Farmingdale.
right.
I graduated from there, so I know pretty well, but they lost a lot of funds there. But I think, just taking it, that would be the first step, is creating this list of other districts that would want to see the change. And then the second step would be reaching out to those districts. And so I wanted to have a conversation, would it be better to reach out to, board presidents, to the other board presidents, or superintendent to the other superintendents?
What about that letter writing campaign that we started last year that we wanted to do here from Monroe and then eventually sending out to the districts that didn't get the money? Do we still have
We would have
that?
to, we still have the letter, we would have to modify it a lot, because it's, a lot of it is specific to Monroe, whereas this would be just a revision of the formula and keeping it very,
Right.
focused on that.
Well, we were hoping that they would take our letter, change it to their needs, and then get on board with us. Isn't that what I thought we were trying to do last year?
That's what we had talked about,
Talked,
initially,
right.
but I don't know.
I think just because it's this specific legislation, to
Okay.
just focus on
Okay.
that and getting that passed
Well,
instead
I'll
of
try to,
Jackson needs new buildings and Tom's River needs updates to their, like, I'm making things up, I have no clue what they need. but
Right.
Just all focused on this one piece of legislation.
I
And
mean,
do you want it just Middlesex County
No,
or
no, the whole state,
statewide?
yeah.
I certainly can reach out to other board presidents, like, once we have a list,
Yeah.
I'm happy to reach out to,
And I
I have a monthly meeting, I only deal with Middlesex County, but I have a monthly
Yeah.
meeting, we can have the same conversation, it could be a topic of conversation
Right.
in Middlesex County superintendents.
Okay,
I'll try to do it. I'll
right, I'll send over the link, and if you.
send me that and I'll.
It won't
Send
take me
it to
long,
everybody.
yeah, it won't take me too long if not, so just let me know.
Yeah, no, and I will call you
I'm
if I
like a
can't.
wizard with this stuff. All right, sounds
This
good.
seems interesting.
So
Right,
I would be curious, and we can get the perspective at our county meetings, but this is a county. So if you guys are at your NJSBA committee meetings and state meetings,
Right.
I think there's a notable difference between what's happened to some districts with the reduction in state aid
right,
for S2 relative to districts that in our case even got increased state aid.
right,
But we're dealing with, and actually I think all districts are dealing with the same thing. It's amplified if you lose state aid,
right,
but those of us who have maintained or have increased state aid,
Right.
the
That's-
underlying issues are the fixed costs to operate in an economy that we're operating in are going up.
right,
That is displacing things that are non-mandated. And those are the things that begin to bubble up in a district like us that maybe are kind of hidden in some of the reduction of state funding, because you can blame everything on I lost state aid, right?
Right,
S-
right.
S2. But embedded in there is your reduction in state aid, but also you're dealing with your increased costs.
right.
So if you do a sort and you see you lost state aid, that's gonna give you one list. But there's a whole bunch of other districts like us that we had a relatively flat budget last year in the sense of staffing additions and
But it's
things
still
like
short
that.
2.7.
What happened is our fixed costs increased, therefore they displaced other things. And that's what we went out to vote on.
Correct.
Right.
That is one of the core issues. We obviously, every district can look at efficiencies, right? But those costs in an economy that we're operating in, whether it's increased competitive salaries in the labor market this way, whether it's increased diesel, fuel, energy costs to operate and maintain buildings, healthcare costs, all of the above are going up much faster than I think any district, even if you get the same amount of state aid year over year,
Right.
you're always going to be losing ground because those things are increasing more than the parameters that are in place for districts to operate in. So I think when we're going to hear a lot of, we lost state aid, I could probably hear that, and I could probably say you probably shouldn't have had that state aid for a while.
Right.
Right, so you're used to operating with things that we haven't been able to operate with for many, 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 many years, right? So, thank you. But now, everybody's supposedly where there should be for S2. Those reductions should be done this year. Any additions should be done this year. This will be the first year, in theory, that everyone's operating with what they should be operating with in terms of state aid. This will be the year that everyone's gonna say, my healthcare costs, my diesel costs, if they haven't said it before, they're gonna say it this year,
Right.
are more than what we can, within the parameters that we operate with. So we're gonna start reducing areas just to maintain what we have or take away. So I'm just curious to see if any of that's gonna come out yet, because the loudest voices right now are the districts that lost things that you could argue they should have already had.
Correct.
So-
It also comes back to the fundamental, because you're saying like everyone is going to get what they should have been getting. I think that it all comes back to, well, is what we're all getting what we're supposed to be getting in the first place, or does the formula need to just be completely revamped? Is the way that we're funding schools right? Like, should we have it be, the local fair share where, the burden is put on certain towns more than others? And so,
Yeah, and that's the school funding task force.
Right.
That's the school formula piece. But in the eyes of the state right now, S2 is in its neutral position, right?
right,
No more ups, no more downs.
Everybody's
And
flat.
any allocation from the governor now will be distributed
evenly,
via the formula. Up and downs will just be the natural distribution of the calculation, right?
right,
Whereas
It makes sense.
You
People
know,
don't
whereas-
know what they should have gotten in the first place.
Right, so some
we know
districts
that.
have been hidden in terms of some of these increases along the way, have compensated for several years of increased operational costs and things like that.
Right.
We see it, we felt it.
Yep.
The districts that are noticing it, maybe that's not what they're crying about, and I don't mean crying about it, but like their
Right,
voices
yeah.
are screaming about right now, but they will be.
Right,
And if you look at the news articles from our surrounding districts, it was a reduction in state aid and increased healthcare costs,
Right.
increased out-of-district tuition, increased transportation. Those three things came up in almost every single article that came, you know, from our local towns and that surround us. They're gonna lose the reduction in state aid piece as an argument, and those
Right.
three things, nothing has changed in our economy.
Mhm.
And nothing has changed for a district to be able to adapt to those increases.
right. And I know,
That's what our legislators need to hear.
like, the healthcare costs, those, you, like, it doesn't have to be part of your 2%, like, the increase isn't necessarily part of your 2% cap. But I think the transportation element and all the others are not things
So,
that,
so there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's not true
So the
completely.
healthcare is embedded in the 2%. They do give a small waiver.
Yes, not all of it.
But it does not cover, and some districts don't have the same increases that other districts do, and that's a function of your, your
employees.
employees and how much their claims are and things like that.
Right.
But the healthcare piece is still under the umbrella of that 2%.
Mhm.
You get a small percentage, a
That's a
small
wage.
piece of
That's
that.
waived.
But the types of increases we're getting these days that are well into the double digits,
Did not cover it.
you know, we would sign on a dotted line any day of the week right now for something around a 10% increase.
Mhm.
You know, because the numbers that were thrown out are pushing 20% in some cases, you know, and on a $35 to $40 million
that's a lot.
piece, that is a massive, massive number to absorb.
Right.
When you can increase your tax base by 2%.
And that's the conversation we wind up having about
Mhm.
where are we at? And we don't like to, you know, when we, the word of adequacy, we don't want to be adequate. We like that we're over adequate. The things that we give, that's why people move here, right?
And again, they need to revisit what is adequate, like, because adequate is not even.
The word adequate, yes.
Adequate is inadequate.
Adequate's not a good word.
That's where it
Adequate
is
is
right now.
inadequate.
Yeah, and I would just say, if the legislators have the ear, if we can get their ear again, or just continue to communicate,
Mhm.
there aren't mechanisms to adapt in an economy like this.
No.
That's it.
Right.
What, there are different ways that we have suggestions, and I'm sure the VAs in the state have many, many different suggestions.
Mhm.
Whether, it's, you know, dealing with the mandates in different ways or waivers or whatever, but, there is no mechanism in place for, you know, dealing with 20% year-over-year increases in certain areas.
Let's, again, I know you want.
Yeah, I just had one thing. October 7th is the New Jersey School Boards Association's next meeting.
The Middlesex County.
Middlesex County, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I wrote Middlesex County too, but that's literal. And, the topic is AI. And I was wondering if we could put together some kind of questionnaire ourselves to give out to Middlesex County people
Right.
that are there. I can ask Sharon Miller.
Like, probably can ask the vice president of Middlesex County if it's allowed.
Well, yeah, but I'd have to ask the president and the rest of the board to see if it would be allowed to give like 5 or 10 minutes for people in the, and tell them ahead of time that there will be a small survey
Right.
given out at this meeting, about what we're talking about now. Would that be feasible or something you think, I mean, I don't mind asking Sharon if we could do it.
I mean,
Is something we think it could be done,
I don't think,
help us or?
I think if we're going to reach out to the school board, other school boards anyway, I don't know if it's necessarily needed, and I don't think it hurts,
I
but.
would almost rather take the opportunity if we could to, let's have a quick, can we just have a brief conversation about, you know, funding and, you know, how has your district been impacted?
Right.
And, you know, I would love to coordinate, a collaborative effort amongst, you know, us here in Middlesex County to bring this forward to the state, like, these are, like, all of us together, like, I would rather be able to open up a conversation. And see who's willing to participate. then do a survey. But I think if that was a possibility,
I can check. I know that the first evening is AI,
yeah.
and that's a big thing. I went to a couple of different, events that the New Jersey school boards offered, Ray Pinney on AI. It's so interesting for a person, I'm gonna say a person my age, because I didn't know what it was until I went to these, and how wonderful. You see the commercial on television where the lady says, put your phone up to the refrigerator and said, what can I make for dinner? Well, I would just look at my husband and say, Joe, what are you making for dinner? Because I don't cook. So, but I'm saying it's phenomenal what AI can do. I even told my son, why don't you get your PhD? It's gonna be so much easier for you to put together a dissertation.
Right.
Now, according to this AI, what I've learned from all, and I have everything on my phone. Maybe somebody could show me how to get it off my phone and we could print it.
You know, it's an interesting concept though, but I think also going to the county meetings, and I want to wrap it up because I know we're already over.
Yes, yes.
They do also have other topics that are discussed. I know each of the officers from the state usually gives it a review. So maybe just saying, can we do 15 minutes about funding, knowing how many districts are affected?
I can ask Sharon, who the AI speaker is, if it's Ray or not,
Mhm.
how much time they planned on using,
Right.
and if it could be discussed.
All right,
I can
sounds good.
check with her.
All right, let's wrap it up and thank you everyone for coming and have a great rest of your summer.
Thank you.